All right, let's do this. Today, we're going to hit rewind and take a trip way back to 1991. We're essentially pressing play on a personal mixtape, a soundtrack built entirely from the childhood favorites that all came out in that one amazing year. So, I want you to picture it. The year is 1991. You've got your foam headphones on. What cassette is spinning in your Walkman? This was the absolute golden age of physical music, of making these super personal mixtapes. And today, we're going to break one of them down. So here's the plan. We're going to move through the year pretty much in order, hitting the big albums that really defined 1991 for at least one music fan out there. And trust me, that year was just absolutely stacked with incredible music.
I mean, just look at this lineup. Seriously. It kicks off with Queen's powerful Farewell in February, rolls into these pop rock anthems in the spring, and then boom, the fall is just dominated by these absolute titans of rock. This timeline right here, it gives you a perfect snapshot of the journey we're about to take. Okay, so let's get our mixtape started with the sounds that were kicking off the year. It's this awesome mix of really poignant rock and just pure pop perfection that kind of set the tone for everything that was about to happen. So the year really started on this powerful, bittersweet note with Queen's Innuendo. It was, of course, the last album Freddie Mercury released in his lifetime, which makes it an incredibly emotional listen. But, for a lot of us, the Queen experience in 1991 didn't even stop there.
Because later that year, on October 28th, they dropped Greatest Hits 2. And this is where it gets really personal. For our source, this compilation was, and I quote, one of the first cassettes I've ever owned. It's just a perfect reminder of how this little piece of plastic could be one of your most prized possessions as a kid.
Up next on the tape, REM's Out of Time from March 12th. And here's another great nostalgic detail. For some, this album was discovered at the local library. Can you even imagine that? Checking out vinyl from the library specifically to record songs for your mixtapes? And of course, that mandolin riff from Losing My Religion was basically a required track on every tape that year.
Then, just a couple weeks later, Roxette came out with their huge album, Joyride. It was just this burst of pure pop energy. But, and this is something we forget, back in '91, how you bought your music actually made a huge difference. The format you picked could totally change what you ended up listening to.
Yeah, check this out. It was a real collector's dilemma at the time. If you wanted the complete Joyride album with all the bonus songs, you had to get it on cassette or CD. If you bought the vinyl LP, well, it was great, but you were actually missing tracks. It's crazy, right? You had to be a pretty savvy shopper to get the whole shebang.
All right, and that's the end of side A. Click. Time to flip that cassette over. We're going to do what our source did here and just skip the whole summer, jumping right into an autumn that was frankly just loaded with legendary albums.
And I'm not kidding. If you thought the spring was good, the autumn of 1991 was on a whole other level. This is when some of the biggest bands on the planet dropped albums that would go on to define the rest of the decade. And kicking off this monster season was Metallica on August 12th with their self-titled album, which we all just call the Black Album. This quote really says it all. The original cassette has worn out from so much listening. I mean, that's the ultimate badge of honor for an album, right? When you physically play it until it falls apart.
Okay, then September 17th happens, and Guns N' Roses does something that was just unheard of. They didn't just release a double album. Nope, they released two completely separate, full-length records on the exact same day. The sheer ambition of Use Your Illusion I and I was mind-blowing, and it created this huge moment in music history.
Let's jump to November 18th. U2 completely reinvents their sound with Acting Baby. And here's how you know an album really hit hard with someone, when one copy just isn't enough. For some fans, this record was so essential they had to own it on both vinyl and cassette. That's dedication.
And speaking of formats, this brings up a really fascinating point, especially for you audiophiles out there. Sometimes the original just can't be beat. When Michael Jackson's Dangerous dropped on November 26th, our source found that the original cassette tape actually sounded better than the CD reissue that came out later. A huge win for that warm, analog sound.
But it wasn't just rock dominating the end of the year. Not at all. For the final few tracks on our mixtape, we've got to dive into the world of synthesizers. Because some major players in electronic and synth pop were dropping classics too.
And here's a fun little piece of music trivia. On one single day, October 14th, two giants of the genre released new albums.
You had Bad Boys Blue with House of Silence and the legendary Erasure with their album Chorus. Two incredible electro-pop records, both hitting the shelves on the exact same day.
18. Just think about that number for a second. That's how many hit singles were packed onto one single album. We're talking about the Pet Shop Boys' discography collection, which was pretty much a masterclass in pop songwriting.
And this is why I love these stories. It shows exactly how music becomes the literal soundtrack to our lives. This album wasn't just a collection of songs. It was a study partner. Our source remembers having it on repeat while studying for a school test. It's those little memories, you know? They fuse an album to your personal history forever.
And with that, click! We're at the end of our 1991 mixtape. But obviously, this is just one person's collection. That year was so packed with other game-changing albums that you can't ignore them.
Which is why we have to give a massive honorable mention here. Because you can't even say the year 1991 in music without talking about this album. On September 24th, Nirvana released Nevermind, and it basically changed everything. Now, while it wasn't a personal favorite for our mixtape's creator at the time, its impact is just undeniable.
So now we're hitting eject on the tape deck, and I'm turning it over to you. Looking back at that incredible, wild year for music, what albums would be on your personal 1991 mixtape? What were the songs that defined that year for you? Let us know. Thanks for listening.